So earlier on in the day, we heard a lot about exponential technologies, about blockchain, about cellular agriculture, and some of the innovations that could be poised to change the way our society works, change the way our economy works. But someone asked the question, what should we do with those gifts? How should we use them, and what rules govern the way that we apply technological innovation? And that person was Azeem Azhar, and he's going to join us now in the View from the Summit studio.
Hi there, how are you
Azeem,
doing?
how are you doing? Nice to see you.
Hi again, Azeem.
Hi, you've kept the Maltesers away from me, I see.
Would you like some?
No, I'm fine. I've had enough.
Had enough.
Are they dishing Maltesers out there as well?
There are all sorts of goodies back there.
Oh.
Yeah, you're not getting any of them.
Well, they always skip us.
Yeah.
Have you had a good day?
It's been amazing because this is not my area of expertise, so I've just been learning a lot.
And what is then? Where would you say your real area of expertise?
Well, I'm not just area of expertise. That is where I spend my time. So I work in the technology industry. I advise some large tech companies, and I'm a venture capitalist as well. I spend a lot of time looking at how fast-moving, fast-developing technologies, the breakthrough ones like artificial intelligence and biotech, are going to impact society. And so my space is very much the sorts of things that will go mainstream in the next 5 years, not the things that are mainstream now. So I'm useless around the house.
Okay, all right. So Pokemon Go, no.
No.
But
the next thing,
the sequel, yeah, it might be on top of it.
What do you think? What's the biggest takeaway you want people to take from what you said earlier? And I know you'll be speaking later for anyone who missed you.
Yeah, well, I think the biggest takeaway is that the technological progress is pretty inescapable, and the centrality of these technology companies and the models that are based around AI and IT systems are going to be the kind of the fundament of how we organize our economies, in the way that oil was the fundament of the previous 60 years and steam the previous 60 before that. But secondly, that you can't trust any organization with power and with vested interests to do the right thing. So you have to be active and well informed and equipped to keep a check on them and keep an eye on them. And fundamentally, technology is not value neutral. It is built in the shape of its creator for their goals and their objectives. And so for all the wonderful things we can do with it, we should bear in mind that it is cast with a direction in mind.
And I subscribe to your excellent newsletter, which I think we spoke about a bit earlier on this show, Exponential View, and the podcast and so on. The thing that I love about that, I'm sure the thing that a lot of other people like about that, is that every week it's packed full of a really thriving, vibrant news around innovation in artificial intelligence, in some of the topics we've heard about today. It doesn't feel like anyone's kind of in control of that. It feels like it's almost this unstoppable momentum. It's just kind of boiling away. Yet you had this wonderful slide earlier that said we need new rules. Is it actually possible to put rules on that sort of really vibrant innovation?
You know, I think that we can create rules. Rules are social agreements. They're just groups of people saying we want to organize ourselves in this way rather than in that way. And you know, recently some Google employees said they didn't want Google to work on a certain Pentagon contract. They collaborated together, and then the company turned around and said one wouldn't run that contract. So while the internet means that we can share and learn from each other very quickly, which is partly why development is happening so quickly, we can still coordinate and start to say, this is a system that we want to have. And I think that we've been a little bit supine, especially both within the technology industry and outside the technology industry, in not saying, hold on a second, we're not sure if we do want this particular outcome. And I'll give you an example. So these ride-sharing businesses have really provided a lot of benefit to many commuters in the cities that they're in. But they now have lots of data about how commuters move around the city. But that data is now private data, but it's publicly valuable.
Yeah.
Now, we can just go off and say, listen, we'd like that to be public. We can say it to our elected representatives, we can put pressure on the companies, but unless we actually say that, the company has no incentive to respond and to make it happen. So a lot of this is on us to actually get out there and say, this is what we want it to look like.
But how do we do that? If these companies who have the data from all around the world, take Uber for example, they operate, one presumes, from San Francisco, how can people here in London or elsewhere around the world really influence a San Franciscan company?
Well, I think there are two ways. I mean, we've already seen the issue with the Uber license within London, which was held back, and Uber had to appeal, and it forced them to change their behaviour in London. And you can apply pressure locally because these markets matter. But the second thing you can do is that you can try to coordinate globally to create a path forward for that company. So it's not easy. It's not as easy as pushing around a minnow, of course. That's the nature of minnows and whales. But I think it's possible. But I think the thing that it strikes me is that we have not, outside of the technology industry, equipped ourselves with the language to go out and have these conversations and say, how do we actually want to design the world for the future that we want to live in? And I'll give you a very simple example. I've just done some research, commissioned some research on how people use Facebook, and I asked a question that said, do you believe that Facebook sells your data? And 66% of people thought that it did, which is wrong. It doesn't, but it didn't affect the amount of time they spent using Facebook. And there's a dissonance there, right? If you're unhappy with that, then stop using Facebook. Then
there's
signal.
also this challenge I've felt as well, that with recent backlash against Facebook, for example, that there's this weird situation where something that you thought was just a luxury that you used to spend a bit of time to share pictures with your friends actually has become a bit of a service in a way.
Yeah.
And the line has been a bit blurred there. So something like WhatsApp, if I really wanted to delete Facebook, I should probably delete WhatsApp as well.
Presumably.
But it's actually a really useful service. So that blurring of the line is making it, I think, quite difficult for people to make decisions about the technology they want to support and the technology which they don't. I mean, with ride sharing as well.
Well, I think that's very true. And so one way I look at this is to say that the way that we access the resources that we need is increasingly mediated through the smartphone, through a handful of apps. If you're bored of an evening, chances are you'll tune to YouTube or to Netflix. If you want to buy something, chances are you'll quickly go to Amazon. They're mediated by these companies. But I think you can still be active and signal that you're not happy with something, because they're very, very data driven as businesses as well. And so if more people deleted their Facebook accounts, I mean, I turned mine off some months ago, that would send a signal to Facebook. And it's a second order question about WhatsApp, but you have to make your victories take one step at a time, as it was. But I'm genuinely a bit concerned about the fact that we don't have regulatory methods to encourage and foster competition in these areas. You know, Amazon came about at a time before dominant platform monopolies. It was able to compete fairly against many, many firms. It's now very hard to be a competitor to Amazon and compete fairly on those terms with Amazon, as an example.
Just as a final question, you've heard a bit about circular economy today. If not just the term, a lot of the themes about creating value and the future that we want to live in. That lamp's been tripped over about 50 times.
Done. It's going to have to be recycled.
So you've heard a lot about that today. In your day-to-day life, are these themes coming up elsewhere, or is it just within the one singular wall of the Roundhouse here?
No, I mean they do come up. I mean, I know the big consultancies all have circular economy practices, and the World Economic Forum does as well. And the large tech companies, which often their employees are very liberal and progressive, and they were the first to drive Priuses 15 years ago, are putting pressure on their firms to think about the full life cycle of their products. Much more so than, say, for sake of argument, an oil company or an airline. Yeah. So the ideas do come up. The idea that it's a different paradigm that is self-supporting and internally consistent, I don't think is strongly understood outside of what I've experienced today. And that's an opportunity, I think, to take the message out further.
Some work to do then. Well, thank you very much for joining us in the studio.
Yeah,
I hope you found it good.